If you've ever felt trapped in an endless routine, unsure of your life's purpose, then this video is for you. Today, we will dive into a story of transformation, courage, and the quest for something greater. It's an adventure that begins with a simple invitation but leads the protagonist to places he never imagined. Stay with us until the end, as this journey may be exactly what you need to awaken your own purpose. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Let's embark on this adventure together. Ethan Carter never thought his life would become so predictable. At 28, he had a stable job at a marketing firm, a comfortable apartment in the city, and friends who joined him in the usual routines, weekend bars, binge-watching series, and occasionally visiting his parents' house. Everything seemed in order, but inside, he felt a growing emptiness, as if something was missing. Wake up, work, go home, sleep, the routine was the same every day. He remembered when he was younger, full of dreams and adventure plans. He wanted to travel the world, experience new cultures, and maybe even write a book. But somehow, those dreams got lost along the way. Now, he was stuck in a life he never truly wanted, unsure of how to escape. Everything changed one ordinary morning when Ethan found a letter in his mailbox. There was no return address, just his name written in elegant handwriting. Intrigued, he opened the envelope and found a piece of yellowed paper with a simple yet mysterious message. Ethan, there is more to life than you imagine. If you are ready to discover it, come to the East Coast Lighthouse at sunset. Your journey begins now. Ethan read the message repeatedly, unsure of what to think. Who could have sent this letter? And what did this journey mean? Throughout the day, he couldn't get the letter out of his mind. Something about the message stirred him in a way he couldn't explain. It was as if a forgotten part of himself was awakening, reminding him that he had desires, dreams, and a purpose that had been set aside. By the end of the day, as the sun began to set on the horizon, Ethan made a decision that would change his life forever. He grabbed his car and drove to the East Coast, a place he hadn't visited since childhood. The road was familiar, but at the same time, full of new possibilities. The lighthouse stood solitary against the golden evening sky. Ethan parked the car and stepped out, feeling the cool, salty breeze against his face. He looked around, searching for any clue about what he should do next. There was no one in sight. Was this some kind of prank? But before he could sink into doubts, he noticed a figure approaching in the distance. A tall man with gray hair and penetrating eyes walked towards him. He wore simple clothes, but there was a silent authority in his demeanor. When he got close enough, he extended his hand to Ethan. "My name is Lucas Hayes," he said with a slight smile. "And I am the one who sent you the letter." Ethan shook Lucas's hand, still trying to process what was happening. "But, why? Who are you?" Lucas looked at him for a moment before responding. "I'm someone who, like you, felt there was something more to life. Many years ago, I also received a letter. And that letter led me on a journey that changed everything. Now, I am here to offer you the same opportunity." Ethan felt a mix of emotions, curiosity, fear, but above all, a sense that this was the beginning of something important. "What do you mean by journey? Where will it lead me?" Lucas smiled again, but this time there was a glimmer in his eyes. "The journey is not about a specific destination, Ethan. It's about finding what you've lost along the way. It's about facing your fears, rediscovering your dreams, and ultimately understanding what your true purpose is. But the decision to move forward or not is entirely yours." Ethan looked at the horizon, where the sun was almost disappearing into the sea. He thought about his life up to now, every choice he had made, the opportunities he had missed, and the constant feeling of dissatisfaction that followed him. For so long, he had ignored the call to something greater, but now, he was faced with the chance to change everything. "What if I say yes?" Ethan asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. "Then you must be prepared to leave behind everything that is familiar," Lucas replied. "This journey will not be easy. There will be challenges, moments of doubt, and sacrifices to be made. But in the end, you may become the person you were always meant to be. Ethan felt the weight of Lucas's words. He knew that the decision was not something to be taken lightly. But he also knew that if he didn't accept, he would spend the rest of his life wondering what could have been. And that, he couldn't bear. "I accept," Ethan said, with a determination that surprised even himself. Lucas nodded, as if he had already expected that answer. "Very well, Ethan. Tomorrow at dawn, your journey will begin. Meet me here, and bring only the essentials. From now on, you are on the path to discovering your true purpose." And with those words, Lucas walked away, leaving Ethan alone at the lighthouse, with the sky now tinted in shades of purple and orange. He looked at the horizon one last time before heading back to the car. His mind was racing, but deep down, there was a new flame ignited in his heart, a hope, an anticipation, and an excitement for what was to come. That night, Ethan slept little, his mind full of thoughts about what the morning would bring. But for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel trapped or lost. Instead, there was a sense of freedom, as if the world was finally opening up to him. And as the first rays of sunlight touched the horizon, Ethan knew he was about to embark on the greatest adventure of his life, a journey beyond the horizon, in search of his true purpose. Dawn brought a new beginning for Ethan Carter. The sun rose on the horizon, bathing the coast in a golden light that promised a day full of possibilities. With his backpack on his shoulders, he drove once again to the lighthouse where he had met Lucas the day before. But this time, there was no nervousness or uncertainty, only determination. Ethan was ready to begin his journey. Lucas was already waiting for him, leaning against an old blue pickup truck. "I see you're ready," he said, giving Ethan an approving glance at the sight of his backpack. "More ready than I've ever been," Ethan replied. He had no idea what was ahead, but he felt confident that this was the right direction. "Then let's go," Lucas said, pointing to the truck. "The mountains won't wait for us." Ethan didn't ask any questions. He climbed into the passenger seat, and within minutes, they were on their way. The road meandered along the coast, then cut through dense forests until the mountains loomed on the horizon, majestic and daunting. Ethan looked at them with a mix of awe and apprehension. He had never climbed a mountain before. How would he be able to face such a challenge? "These mountains are like life," Lucas said, breaking the silence as he drove. "At first glance, they might seem insurmountable. But each step you take, each decision you make, brings you closer to the summit. The key is not to give up, even when the path seems impossible." After a few hours of travel, they reached the base of the mountain. Lucas parked the truck in a rest area and began unloading the equipment. Ethan followed suit, grabbing his backpack and looking up at the steep cliffs rising before him. The summit seemed to be in another world, hidden among the clouds. "Let's get started," Lucas said, adjusting his backpack straps. "The climb to the top won't be easy, but it's necessary. This is the first major test of your journey." Without another word, they began the ascent. At first, the terrain was moderate, with clearly marked trails and gentle slopes. But as they progressed, the path became increasingly treacherous. Loose rocks, deep chasms, and the thin air due to the altitude began to weigh heavily on Ethan. Each step required more effort than the last, and soon he was panting, sweat streaming down his face. Lucas, on the other hand, appeared unshaken. He moved with a calmness that only someone experienced would have. At each obstacle, he stopped, assessed the situation, and guided Ethan with patience. But even with Lucas's help, Ethan began to doubt his abilities. The mountain seemed endless, and exhaustion started to take over. Then an incident occurred. Ethan was crossing a narrow ledge of stone when one of his feet slipped. He tried to hold on, but the weight of the backpack pulled him back, and for a moment that felt like an eternity, he hung over the void, with only one hand gripping a rock. "Lucas," he shouted, panic evident in his voice. Lucas instantly turned and, with surprising speed, came over to help. He grabbed Ethan's arm firmly and, with a determined pull, brought him back to the safety of the trail. "Are you okay?" Lucas asked, not letting go of Ethan's arm until he was sure he was firmly on the ground. Ethan, still breathing heavily, nodded, but the shock of what had just happened was clear on his face. I almost fell." "But you didn't fall," Lucas said, looking into Ethan's eyes. "And that's what matters. In the mountains, as in life, you will slip. There will be moments when it seems like everything is lost. But if you hold on and believe you can keep going, you'll find the strength to move forward." These words resonated deeply with Ethan. He realized that what had happened was not just a physical slip, it was a test of his resilience. It would be easy to give up, descend the mountain, and return to his comfortable, predictable life. But he knew that if he did that, he would be giving up not only on the climb but on the entire journey he had started. "I'm okay," Ethan said, finally regaining his composure. "Let's keep going." Lucas smiled and nodded, and together, they resumed the climb. The mountain continued to challenge them, but something had changed in Ethan. He was more focused, more determined not to let fear overtake him. With each step, he felt stronger, more confident in his ability to overcome obstacles. After hours of arduous climbing, they reached a plateau where they could rest. Ethan collapsed onto a rock, exhausted, but also feeling a sense of accomplishment he hadn't felt in a long time. He looked around at the mountain surrounding him and realized how far he had come. And although the summit was still distant, he now believed he could reach it. As they rested, Ethan noticed a figure approaching them. It was an older man with a graying beard and climbing gear. He moved with the ease of someone who knew the terrain well. "I see you've started the journey," the man said, smiling as he approached. "I'm Jack, an old mountaineer of these mountains. I've seen many like you pass through here, some ready for the challenge, others, not so much." Lucas greeted Jack as if they were old friends. "This is Ethan, he's starting his own journey." Jack nodded and sat beside Ethan. "The mountains have a funny way of teaching us about ourselves. They test our physical strength, but mainly, they test our minds. Climbing these rocks is not just about strength but about courage and perseverance. Many give up before reaching the top, but those who continue, they discover something that changes them forever." Ethan listened intently. Jack's words and the experience he conveyed were inspiring. The mountain was not just a physical obstacle, it was a symbol of all the challenges he would face in his life. And at that moment, Ethan decided that he would not only climb this mountain but also face all the challenges that lay ahead with the same determination. As they prepared to continue climbing, Jack handed Ethan a small amulet, a piece of stone carved into the shape of a mountain. "Carry this with you as a reminder. The journey is tough, but the summit is always worth it." Ethan thanked him and put the amulet in his pocket, feeling strengthened by Jack's presence and the lessons learned from Lucas. They then resumed their climb, with the summit now closer than ever. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the mountains, Ethan realized that he was finally starting to discover what it meant to have a purpose. The path would be arduous, but he was ready. And this was only the first of many mountains he was determined to climb. Ethan Carter was exhausted. After the grueling climb, he and Lucas finally reached the top of the mountain, but what awaited them on the other side was something he was not prepared to face. As they descended the opposite slope, a shadowy valley revealed itself ahead, surrounded by steep cliffs and shrouded in a dense fog that seemed to absorb all the light around it. The sun, which had once guided them with its comforting warmth, was now just a pale blur in the sky, struggling to penetrate the darkness enveloping the valley. "This is the Valley of Shadows," Lucas said, with a serious expression on his face. "A place where many get lost, not due to lack of physical strength, but because of the battles they must fight within themselves." Ethan looked at his mentor, a shiver running down his spine. Since the beginning of the journey, he had faced physical challenges that tested his limits, but now he realized that the true test was about to begin. The valley was not just a passage to the next stage of his adventure, it was a crucible for his mind and spirit. Everyone who comes through here faces something different, Lucas continued as they walked towards the valley. Fears, regrets, doubts. These are the shadows we carry within us, and here they become real. The entrance to the valley was narrow, almost like a crack in the rock. Lucas led the way, and Ethan followed hesitantly. As they entered, the mist enveloped them completely, and the world around them seemed to disappear. The silence was absolute, broken only by the sound of their own footsteps on the stone floor. As they advanced, the terrain became more uneven, and the mist grew denser. Ethan felt a growing weight in his chest, as if the air around him was becoming heavier and harder to breathe. He looked at Lucas, searching for some guidance, but he realized that the mentor was distant, almost like a shadow in the mist. "Lucas?" Ethan called, but his voice seemed to be absorbed by the darkness around them. He tried to quicken his pace to catch up, but the faster he walked, the more Lucas seemed to move away. Panic began to rise within him. Ethan found himself alone in the valley, with no one to guide him. And it was at this moment that the shadows began to take shape. The first figure that appeared before him was an older man, with a face wrinkled by time and eyes full of deep sadness. Ethan recognized him immediately. It was his father, who had passed away years before, leaving behind a void that he had never managed to fill. "You failed me," said the figure, with a voice that sounded like a distant echo. "You never followed in my footsteps, never became the man I expected you to be." Ethan felt a tightness in his heart. He had always carried the weight of his father's expectations, the feeling that he was never good enough. The words echoed in his mind, bringing back all the times he had felt like a failure, all the times he had doubted himself. He tried to push the image away, but the figure of his father seemed to grow as his thoughts deepened. And then, other shadows began to emerge from the mist. A woman appeared, her face reflecting pain and disillusionment. It was Emily, his former girlfriend, the one he let go when life became too complicated. "You abandoned me," she said, her voice filled with bitterness. "You promised you would always be by my side, but when I needed you, you ran away." Ethan tried to defend himself, tried to explain that it hadn't been intentional, that circumstances had separated them, but the words died in his throat. He knew that part of what she said was true. He had let fear and uncertainty dominate his decisions, and it led him to lose someone he loved deeply. The pain of memories and regrets accumulated inside him. The shadows around him multiplied, each one representing a mistake, a failure, a missed opportunity. He was surrounded by ghosts of the past, each demanding answers, each bringing forth fears he struggled to bury. Ethan felt his legs weaken. The desire to give up was overwhelming. The valley seemed to close in around him, the shadows growing closer, more suffocating. He fell to his knees, with his head in his hands, wishing for it all to end. But in the depths of his mind, a soft, almost imperceptible voice whispered. It was Lucas's voice, repeating the words he had said before, "In the mountains, just like in life, you will slip, but if you hold on tight and believe, you will find the strength to move forward." Ethan took a deep breath, trying to calm his mind. He knew that these shadows were a manifestation of his own fears, his own insecurities. And he knew that the only way to overcome them was to face them head-on. He slowly stood up, his eyes fixed on the shadows around him. "I am not defined by my mistakes," he said, his voice firm though trembling. "I am more than that. I may not have been perfect, but I am here, trying to be better." The shadows began to recede, the mist starting to clear. Every time Ethan affirmed his determination, the valley became less oppressive. He faced each of the figures that appeared, acknowledging his fears but also affirming his intention to overcome them. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the valley began to brighten. The sunlight returned to penetrate the mist, and the shadows disappeared completely. Ethan was exhausted but standing. He had faced the worst of himself and, though there were still scars, he knew he had emerged stronger. Lucas reappeared by his side, with a look of approval. "You passed the test, Ethan. Many get lost here, but you found the strength to move forward." Ethan nodded, feeling a new confidence growing within him. The Valley of Shadows had been one of the hardest challenges of his life, but also the most revealing. He realized that the journey was not just about reaching a physical destination but about discovering himself, facing his own demons, and emerging stronger than before. As they continued their journey, Ethan knew that many challenges lay ahead. But now, he was more prepared than ever to face them. The sun blazed in the cloudless sky, spreading its relentless heat over the vast desert ahead. Ethan Carter, now more confident and determined after surviving the Valley of Shadows, faced the new phase of his journey with a mix of apprehension and resolve. Before him, a sea of sand stretched as far as his eyes could see, undulating under the heat of the day like an endless mirage. Lucas, his mentor, had given him clear instructions before setting off. "In the desert, you will face loneliness and despair, but you will also discover a strength you never knew you had. Keep moving forward, no matter how endless the path seems." Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the scorching heat already beginning to drain his energy. Each step he took sank into the hot sand, making the walk even more exhausting. The surroundings were desolate, endless dunes, absolute silence broken only by the sound of his own footsteps, and the relentless sun that seemed to want to burn him to the bone. At first, he maintained a steady pace, confident that the desert would be just another trial to overcome. But as time passed and the sun continued to punish him, confidence began to give way to fatigue and doubt. The horizon seemed unreachable, and the monotony of the desert started to weigh on his mind. Loneliness, which had once been a distant presence, now enveloped him completely. There were no shadows to hide in, no signs of life. It was as if the entire world had been reduced to that vast expanse of sand, with no beginning or end. Ethan began to feel despair creeping in, an overwhelming sense that he would never escape that place. Each step grew heavier, each breath more difficult. He started to doubt himself, questioning whether he really had the strength to continue. Lucas's words echoed in his mind, but now they seemed distant, almost unreal. The desert was taking its toll, and Ethan felt his reserves of energy and determination dwindling. Then, when he was on the brink of collapse, he spotted something on the horizon. A figure was moving slowly, stumbling like he was, struggling against the same despair that was overwhelming him. Ethan squinted, trying to distinguish if it was a mirage or a real person. With effort, he quickened his pace, heading toward the figure. As Ethan approached, he realized it wasn't just one person, but several. A small group of travelers, all clearly exhausted and disoriented, had gathered around a single point of shade, a small rock that barely provided relief from the heat, but which they clung to as if it were their only salvation. Ethan reached them, his eyes meeting faces filled with despair and exhaustion. Among them, an older man, with graying beard and deeply tired eyes, lifted his head to look at him. "Are you stuck in this hell too?" the man asked, his voice rough and weary. Ethan nodded, feeling a mix of relief at finding others like him and sadness at seeing their state. "Yes, but we need to keep moving. We can't give up here." The man let out a bitter laugh. "Easier said than done. We have nowhere to go. We've been here for days, without water, without direction. Just waiting for the end." Ethan looked around, seeing the hopelessness on the others' faces. But something inside him, a flame that had been ignited in the Vale of Shadows, refused to accept defeat. He knew he couldn't let despair take over. "Listen," he said, with renewed determination in his voice. "If we stay here, we will die. But if we stick together, if we keep moving, we have a chance. We can find a way out of this desert." The other travelers looked at him, some with skepticism, others with a glimmer of hope. Ethan knew he needed to convince them that he needed to be the strength they had lost. "I know you're tired, and the despair is great. But we didn't come this far to give up now. We can support each other, share what we have, and together, we can cross this desert. We need to believe that there's something beyond this sand, something worth fighting for." The older man sighed deeply, as if summoning the last of his strength. "And what if we're just walking in circles? What if there's no way out?" Ethan knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "If we give up now, we'll never know. But if we keep going, at least we will have fought until the end. And maybe, just maybe, we'll find more than we expected." With these words, Ethan saw a change in the man's eyes. The flame of hope, though fragile, began to shine again. And then, one by one, the travelers stood up, determined to follow Ethan. Crossing the desert wouldn't be easy. The heat remained relentless, and the sand seemed to shift beneath their feet, making each step harder. But now, with the group by his side, Ethan felt a new inner strength. The solitude had dissipated, replaced by solidarity and mutual support. They had become a unit, each supporting the other, sharing the little they had, and encouraging one another to keep going. Days passed in this crossing. There were moments of weakness, of near surrender, but there was always someone to pull the other back onto the path. The journey was exhausting, but the spirit of camaraderie kept them moving forward. Ethan, who had once seen himself as a solitary traveler in search of purpose, was now part of something greater, something beyond his own journey. When they finally sighted the end of the desert, a new lush landscape emerging in the distance, they knew they had overcome the worst. The desert crossing had been a test of endurance, both physical and mental, but also a testament to the fact that, together, they were stronger. As they reached the edge of the new land, Ethan looked at his fellow travelers and smiled. They had done the impossible, crossed the desert, and survived. But more than that, they had found a common purpose, something that united and strengthened them. The next step of the journey was still uncertain, but one thing was clear: they would not be alone. The desert had shown Ethan that, no matter how tough the journey, no one has to walk alone. And with that certainty, he and his new friends moved forward, ready to face whatever came next. After days facing merciless deserts, dark valleys, and treacherous mountains, Ethan Carter and his fellow travelers arrived at what seemed to be the end of their arduous odyssey. Ahead, a new land stretched out, rich in vibrant colors and countless opportunities. The horizon glowed with a golden hue, as if the sun itself were welcoming them to a new beginning. Ethan paused at the edge of the hill, his eyes fixed on the vastness before him. Beside him, Lucas, the mentor who had guided him from the beginning, and the other travelers who had joined him in the desert, all shared the same sense of wonder and relief. They had finally reached the place that seemed to have been waiting for them, a place where the impossible became possible. The land before them was a harmonious blend of nature and civilization. Green fields stretched far and wide, dotted with cozy villages and vibrant cities. Rivers meandered through the terrain, their crystal-clear waters reflecting the sunlight. The mountains, once an obstacle, now formed a majestic backdrop, like silent guardians of this land of promise. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the fresh air fill his lungs. For the first time in a long while, he felt truly at peace. The journey had been long and fraught with challenges, but each step, each obstacle overcome, had shaped him in ways he could never have imagined. The young man who had left home with uncertainties and fears had transformed into someone with a clear purpose and unwavering confidence. "Is this where our journey ends?" one of the travelers asked, his voice full of expectation. Lucas smiled, his wise eyes reflecting the golden light of the horizon. "No, my friend. This is where it begins." Ethan understood what Lucas meant. The true journey wasn't about reaching a final destination, but about what they had learned along the way. The challenges faced, the lessons absorbed, and the connections formed had shaped them all. They were in a land of opportunities, but the real treasure they had found was within themselves. "Each challenge we faced," Ethan began, his voice firm and filled with conviction, "brought us to this point. But what matters is not just where we arrived, but who we became. The true adventure is the growth we achieved and the lessons we learned." Now, we have the chance to start something new, to apply everything we've learned and create a bright future." The others listened in silence, absorbing every word. There was a tacit understanding among them, a deep connection forged by the journey they shared. Ethan knew it was time to make a decision, to choose how they would shape their lives from then on. "This land is rich in opportunities," he continued, gesturing to the vast expanse ahead. "But the real gold is in us, in the strength we discovered throughout the journey. Now, it's up to us to decide how we will use that strength to build something greater, not just for ourselves, but for those we meet along the way." A renewed sense of determination filled the group. Ethan, now a natural leader, felt the responsibility that came with this new phase. He looked at Lucas, who simply nodded in approval. The mentor knew his mission was complete. Ethan was ready to guide others on their own journeys of self-discovery. The travelers began to descend the hill, their silhouettes bathed in the golden light of the horizon. The land that awaited them was full of promise, but Ethan knew that the greatest treasure was the wisdom and strength they carried within themselves. They were ready to begin their new lives, to build something that reflected what they had learned and lived. As they reached the base of the hill, they went their separate ways, each following their own path but always connected by the journey they had shared. Ethan went on his way, finding a welcoming village where he decided to settle and share his story. Over time, the story of Ethan and his journey spread across the land. He became a symbol of courage, resilience, and determination. Others, inspired by his story, began their own adventures, determined to discover their own golden horizons. Ethan often remembered his mentor, Lucas, and the words he had shared throughout the journey. Now, as a mentor to others, he passed on the wisdom he had received, knowing that the journey of self-discovery and fulfillment never ends, it only evolves, as each of us finds our own purpose and moves toward our golden horizon. And so, the cycle continued, with each new journey inspiring the next. Ethan's legacy was not only in the land he discovered but in the lives he touched and the courage he awakened in others. That was the incredible journey of Ethan Carter, from despair to discovering true purpose. If you felt inspired by this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Ethan's adventure may have come to an end, but yours might just be beginning. Keep exploring, keep seeking, and who knows what you might find on your own golden horizon.